The eyes are windows to the soul, as the old saying goes, but in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, the eyes can also serve as doorways to oblivion. Among all the ways an adventurer might meet their end in the depths of forgotten dungeons or the wilderness of uncharted lands, few fates inspire such visceral, primal terror as petrification. The transformation from living, breathing flesh into cold, lifeless stone occurs in mere moments. No chance for final words, no opportunity for heroic last stands. Just the sudden, absolute cessation of existence as a thinking, feeling being replaced by an eternal prison of stone from which there may be no escape. Two creatures stand above all others as masters of this horrifying form of execution, the Basilisk and the Medusa. These monsters, though separated by vast differences in intelligence, motivation, and behavior, share a single terrible commonality. Their gaze transforms life into stone. This shared capability has cemented their positions as some of the most feared predators in the multiverse, creatures whose very presence transforms tactical combat into a desperate game of survival where a single glance might mean the difference between victory and eternal imprisonment. The basilisk represents nature twisted into something fundamentally wrong. An eight-legged monstrosity that blends reptilian features with an anatomy that defies conventional zoology, it hunts not through superior speed or strength, but through patient ambush and the application of supernatural terror. The creature embodies the nightmare of the patient predator, the threat that waits motionless in the places travelers must pass, relying on perfect camouflage and inhuman patience to bring prey within range of its deadly stare. The Medusa, by contrast, represents a different category of horror entirely. Where the basilisk is a beast driven by hunger and instinct, the Medusa possesses keen intelligence, overwhelming vanity, and boundless malice. This creature does not simply kill, it deceives, manipulates, and betrays. The Medusa understands social structures well enough to infiltrate them, comprehends wealth and power well enough to crave them, and possesses sufficient cunning to acquire both through elaborate schemes that leave trails of petrified victims in their wake. What makes these creatures particularly fascinating from a scholarly perspective is not merely their ability to petrify, but the vastly different contexts in which this power manifests. The basilisk's petrifying gaze serves as a hunting tool, an evolutionary adaptation that compensates for its sluggish movement and allows it to secure prey despite physical limitations. The Medusa's gaze, however, functions as a weapon of terror and control, wielded by a calculating mind that understands exactly when and how to deploy it for maximum psychological and tactical advantage. The study of these creatures reveals truths that extend beyond simple monster identification. Understanding the basilisk requires examining its ecology, its behavioral patterns, its preferred habitats, and the ways in which its physical limitations shape its hunting strategies. Understanding the Medusa demands analysis of psychology, criminal behavior, social infiltration techniques, and the particular breed of malevolent intelligence that allows a monster to hide in plain sight among civilized populations. Furthermore, both creatures exist in variant forms that expand their threat profiles considerably. The abyssal greater basilisk transforms a dangerous but manageable terrestrial predator into a fiendish nightmare capable of serving demon lords. Individual Medusas like Sidal demonstrate that even among a species defined by evil and vanity, there exist specimens whose depravity reaches depths that shock even their own kind. This exploration delves into the details adventurers must understand to survive encounters with these legendary monsters, the physiological realities that govern how basilisks hunt, the psychological profiles that predict how Medusas operate, the variants and exceptional specimens that defy standard expectations, the criminal organizations and dark alliances that form around these creatures. Each detail represents knowledge that might mean the difference between survival and spending eternity as a statue decorating some monster's lair. The basilisk presents itself as a creature of contradictions. At first glance, its physical form suggests a formidable predator. An adult specimen stretches approximately 6 feet in length along its main body, with a muscular tail extending an additional 5 to 7 feet behind it. The total mass of such a creature reaches roughly 300 pounds, distributed across a heavily built frame supported by 8 powerful legs. Some individuals possess a short, curved horn positioned atop the nose, adding to their already intimidating appearance. The coloration tends toward dull browns along the back and sides, transitioning to yellowish tones across the underbelly, a pattern that might seem unremarkable until one considers its function. These physical characteristics, however, tell only part of the story. The basilisk's 8-legged configuration and considerable bulk create an assumption of speed and agility that the creature's actual capabilities thoroughly contradict. The basilisk is, in fact, remarkably sluggish. Its slow metabolism and ponderous movement make it one of the least mobile predators in its size category. This apparent disadvantage, however, has shaped the creature's entire hunting strategy into something far more insidious than simple pursuit predation. The basilisk has evolved into an ambush specialist of the highest order. Its preferred habitat consists of warm, desert environments, where its dull coloration blends seamlessly into sandy, rocky terrain. The creature possesses an almost supernatural capacity for absolute stillness, remaining motionless for extended periods that would be impossible for most living things. During these vigils, the basilisk becomes effectively invisible, not through magical means, but through perfect natural camouflage and patience that outlasts the wariness of potential prey. This hunting strategy reveals itself fully when examining the basilisk's combat behavior. The creature demonstrates remarkable energy conservation, approaching physical confrontation with an almost miserly reluctance to expend effort. When prey or potential threats enter its domain, the basilisk relies almost exclusively on its petrifying gaze. This supernatural ability affects any creature within 30 feet that meets the basilisk's eyes, transforming living tissue into solid stone in moments. The transformation is permanent, creating yet another statue to mark the basilisk's hunting ground and serve as both trophy and warning to future intruders. Physical attacks represent a last resort for the basilisk. Only when an opponent manages to close to melee range, successfully evading or resisting the petrifying gaze, does the creature resort to biting. Even then, its commitment to physical combat remains minimal. Should an enemy survive the initial encounter and choose flight over continued battle, the basilisk typically offers only the most half-hearted pursuit. Its slow metabolism and energy-conserving nature make extended chases counterproductive. Better to remain in position, conserving energy for the next opportunity, than to exhaust itself chasing prey that has already escaped the optimal killing zone. The basilisk's lifestyle outside of active hunting reflects this same energy-conserving philosophy. When not stalking prey, these creatures spend extraordinary amounts of time sleeping in their lairs, digesting previous meals with reptilian slowness. Their diet consists primarily of small mammals, birds, reptiles, and similar creatures that wander within range of their ambush positions. The petrifying gaze proves equally effective whether the target is food or threat, making the basilisk's hunting method brutally egalitarian in its application. Despite their generally solitary nature, basilisks demonstrate surprising social flexibility under specific circumstances. During mating seasons or when occupying particularly hostile terrain that requires mutual defense, these creatures gather in small colonies ranging from 3 to 6 individuals. These temporary communities transform the threat profile dramatically. A lone basilisk represents a dangerous ambush predator. A colony of basilisks represents a nearly insurmountable obstacle, as multiple petrifying gazes create overlapping fields of deadly effect that leave intruders with virtually no safe lines of sight. The basilisk's fearsome reputation extends beyond its immediate physical threat. The creature's name alone carries such weight that criminal organizations have adopted it as a symbol of terror. The men of the Basilisk, a violent confederation of bandits and slavers operating along the dragon coast of Faerun, chose their moniker specifically to invoke the paralyzing dread associated with the creature. This criminal enterprise understands that sometimes the threat of the basilisk proves as effective as the reality, that the mere suggestion of that petrifying gaze creates hesitation and fear sufficient to break enemy morale before battle is even joined. The terrestrial basilisk, dangerous as it proves to surface-dwelling adventurers, represents merely the beginning of the basilisk threat spectrum. In the howling wastes and nightmare landscapes of the abyss, among the infinite layers where chaos and evil achieve their purest expressions, exists a variant that transforms the already formidable basilisk into something far more terrifying. The abyssal greater basilisk stands as proof that even nature's cruelest designs can be improved upon when filtered through the corrupting influence of the lower planes. These fiendish creatures dwarf their material plane cousins in both size and threat level. Classified as large outsiders rather than simple magical beasts, abyssal greater basilisks possess physical dimensions that exceed standard basilisks by considerable margins. Their bodies radiate an aura of wrongness that identifies them immediately as creatures fundamentally alien to the natural order. These are not animals that happen to possess magical abilities. These are fiends, beings whose very existence stems from evil given physical form and purpose. The abyssal greater basilisk's native environment consists of the barren, hostile wastelands that stretch across various layers of the abyss. In these nightmarish badlands where reality itself bends to accommodate the whims of chaos and malevolence, the greater basilisks hunt prey far more dangerous than desert rodents and unwary travelers. They contend with demons, other fiendish predators, and the occasional mortal foolish or desperate enough to traverse the abyss. This hostile environment has honed the greater basilisk into something far more durable and deadly than its material plane relatives. The enhanced capabilities of an abyssal greater basilisk extend well beyond simple size advantages. These creatures possess innate resistances to cold and fire, allowing them to traverse the temperature extremes common to various abyssal layers without discomfort. Their resistance to magic provides substantial protection against the spells and supernatural abilities wielded by the demons and sorcerers they encounter. Perhaps most significantly, their hides possess a toughness that deflects standard weaponry, forcing opponents to rely on enchanted arms or alternative tactics to inflict meaningful damage. The abyssal greater basilisk retains the petrifying gaze that makes all basilisks so feared, but adds to this foundation a suite of abilities that reflect its fiendish nature. Once per day, the creature can channel its alignment-driven malice into a devastating attack called Smite Good. This ability allows the greater basilisk to pour all its evil essence into a single bite, transforming what would normally be a painful but survivable attack into a catastrophic strike capable of killing even powerful warriors in a single blow. The restriction to good-aligned targets reflects the deep metaphysical hatred that fiends harbor for all things wholesome and pure. Demon lords, those godlike entities who rule the various layers of the abyss, recognize the value of such creatures. Abyssal, greater basilisks frequently serve as heavy guards and escorts for important demons, their combination of petrifying gaze and physical durability making them ideal for protecting valuable assets or accompanying high-ranking fiends on dangerous missions. A demon lord traveling through contested territory might surround itself with a pack of greater basilisks, creating a mobile fortress of petrifying gazes that dissuades all but the most determined or suicidal attackers. The presence of abyssal greater basilisks extends beyond the confines of the lower planes, however. Dark sorcerers with sufficient knowledge and power can summon these fiendish creatures to the material plane, binding them to service through complex pacts and magical compulsions. Such summonings typically occur when standard guardians prove insufficient, when the summoner requires protection against enemies capable of overcoming conventional defenses. An abyssal greater basilisk stationed at a crucial choke point or guarding a vital treasure transforms any infiltration attempt into a potentially lethal endeavor. Adventurers who encounter these enhanced basilisks quickly discover that tactics effective against standard specimens prove woefully inadequate. The greater basilisk's resistances neutralize many common damage types. Its enhanced durability allows it to withstand focused attacks that would fell lesser creatures, and its Smite Good ability creates a constant threat of sudden, overwhelming damage that forces good-aligned warriors to maintain defensive caution even when they believe they have gained the upper hand. The petrifying gaze remains present as well, of course, adding the ever-present threat of instant transformation to stone. Where the basilisk represents monstrous nature and the abyssal greater basilisk embodies fiendish corruption of that nature, the Medusa stands as something altogether different. This creature does not simply kill, it plots, schemes, manipulates, and deceives. The Medusa possesses an intelligence fully equal to that of humans, and a psychological profile defined by greed, vanity, and seething malice toward all other living things. Physically, a Medusa stands between 5 and 6 feet tall, with a weight comparable to an average human. This similarity to human proportions serves the creature well, as it forms the foundation for the Medusa's most dangerous capability. At distances exceeding 30 feet, or when the creature carefully conceals its face beneath hoods, veils, or other coverings, a Medusa becomes completely indistinguishable from a normal, well-proportioned human. This ability to pass as human allows the Medusa to infiltrate civilized areas, interact with unsuspecting victims, and position itself advantageously before revealing its true nature. A closer examination, however, reveals the monstrosity lurking beneath the humanoid facade. The Medusa's skin possesses a scaly texture and earth-toned coloration that no amount of cosmetics can fully disguise at close range. The eyes glow with a deep, feral red luminescence that betrays the creature's supernatural nature. Most horrifying of all, the Medusa's head is crowned not with hair, but with a writhing, hissing mass of living, venomous snakes. These serpents possess independent animation and awareness, their heads weaving through the air, tongues flickering, fangs dripping with potent venom. The psychological drives that motivate Medusas differ dramatically from the simple hunger that governs basilisk behavior. Medusas crave wealth, fine jewelry, and art objects with an intensity that borders on obsession. Their daily activities often revolve entirely around acquiring these treasures through whatever means prove most effective. This greed, combined with profound vanity regarding their own perceived beauty and superiority, creates a creature whose motivations can be understood, predicted, and potentially exploited by those brave or foolish enough to attempt negotiation. Medusas demonstrate remarkable adaptability in their choice of habitats, appearing in virtually every climate and environment where intelligent prey can be found. Some specimens establish lairs in wilderness areas, creating elaborate traps and ambush sites designed to capture travelers wealthy enough to be worth the effort. Others take a far more audacious approach, establishing themselves within large cities where population density and economic activity create abundant opportunities for profit. Urban Medusas frequently become deeply involved in criminal underworld activities. Their intelligence, ruthlessness, and unique capabilities make them valuable assets for organized crime. Some Medusas establish their own criminal enterprises, forming highly organized robbery rings that target wealthy merchants, noble estates, or religious institutions. Others create smuggling operations, moving contraband through city districts while using their petrifying gaze to eliminate competitors or silence witnesses who might alert authorities. The most successful urban Medusas achieve positions of genuine power within criminal hierarchies. A Medusa operating as the secret leader of a thieves' guild, for instance, enjoys all the benefits of organized crime without exposing itself to the risks of street-level activity. Subordinates handle routine operations, while the Medusa focuses on high-value targets and strategic planning. The petrifying gaze serves as the ultimate enforcement tool, transforming troublesome lieutenants or rival gang leaders into permanent stone warnings against betrayal. Beyond criminal enterprises, some Medusas find employment in the courts of powerful entities who value their unique skills. The Hag Countess of Malbolge, during her reign over that layer of the Nine Hells, maintained a court that included Medusas alongside Anises and Green Hags. These Medusas served as assassins, advisors, and enforcers, their petrifying gazes providing the Hag Countess with a reliable method for eliminating threats without conventional violence that might provoke retaliation. The Medusa's combat methodology reflects its intelligence and understanding of psychological warfare. Unlike the basilisk, which relies on camouflage and patience to bring prey within range, the Medusa employs active deception. Typical Medusa combat tactics begin long before actual violence occurs. The creature dresses in garments carefully chosen to enhance its humanoid proportions while concealing obvious monstrous features. Thick hoods, ornate veils, or masks hide the serpentine crown and glowing eyes. The Medusa then uses bluffing and subterfuge to approach targets, presenting itself as a harmless merchant, a distressed traveler, a potential romantic interest, or any other role that encourages the victim to lower their guard. The Medusa waits until targets move within 30 feet before revealing its true nature. The sudden removal of hood or veil, the exposure of those glowing red eyes and writhing serpent hair, typically creates a moment of shock that proves fatal. The victim's gaze meets the Medusa's eyes, and the petrification process begins immediately. Flesh transforms to stone in seconds, preserving the victim's expression of horror for eternity. Should an enemy prove resistant to the petrifying gaze, or wise enough to avert their eyes, the Medusa possesses alternative combat capabilities. Most Medusas carry conventional weapons, such as short bows for ranged combat, or daggers for close-quarters fighting. The serpents crowning the Medusa's head serve as additional weapons, striking at adjacent opponents with fangs that inject a potent, strength-sapping poison. This venom weakens victims, reducing their combat effectiveness and making them easier targets for conventional attacks or subsequent gaze attempts. The Medusa species, defined as it is by greed, vanity, and malice, nonetheless maintains certain standards of behavior. Most Medusas, while thoroughly evil, operate within recognizable patterns of predatory intelligence. They kill for profit, petrify for advantage, and scheme for power. Their motivations, while reprehensible, remain comprehensible. Some Medusas, however, descend into depths of depravity so profound that they disturb even their own kind. Siddle represents such a specimen, a creature whose darkness extends beyond mere evil into realms of genuine madness. Siddle began her existence as one of 5 Medusa sisters, but even among this group of hateful, vain creatures, she stood out as fundamentally wrong. Her sisters eventually found her presence so repulsive, her interests so disturbing, that they drove her away from their shared territory. The fact that Medusas, creatures who routinely murder innocents for jewelry and transform living beings into garden statuary, found Siddle too repellent to tolerate, speaks volumes about the depths of her corruption. Exile, however, did not humble Siddle or encourage reflection on her path. Instead, it freed her to pursue interests that her sisters had constrained. She embraced a dark calling, studying forbidden lore and seeking artifacts that reflected her twisted nature. Eventually, she acquired a vile relic known as a flesh-eater rod and committed herself fully to the path of the Cancer Mage, a specialization so horrific that most magical traditions refuse to acknowledge its existence. The Cancer Mage path transforms the practitioner into a living repository of disease and decay. Siddle became a masochist, obsessed with self-mutilation and the spread of contagion. She wears armor constructed entirely of filthy rags, a tatterdemalion that serves as both protection and a symbol of her complete rejection of the vanity that defines most Medusas. While her sisters covet fine silks and elegant gowns that display their humanoid beauty, Siddle surrounds herself with rotting cloth that reeks of infection and decay. Her most disturbing ability is designated as Disease Host, a supernatural transformation that makes her completely immune to the negative effects of any disease she carries, while simultaneously turning her into a perfect vector for transmission. Siddle actively seeks out new diseases, exposing herself to every foul contagion she encounters. Each infection fails to harm her, but adds to her growing collection of maladies that she can spread to others through contact or magical means. She has become a walking plague, a repository of suffering that she inflicts on the world around her. Perhaps most horrifying is the sentient tumor that has grown within Siddle's body. This cancerous mass possesses its own personality and intellect, a parasitic consciousness that communicates with its host and influences her decisions. The relationship between Siddle and her tumor represents a grotesque parody of companionship, 2 diseased beings sharing a single corrupted form, each enabling the other's worst impulses. Siddel's story intersects with that of Gadaris, a half-orc vermin lord whose own darkness complements hers perfectly. Gadaris commands influence over vermin, particularly rats and insects, using these creatures to extend his awareness and carry out his will. Together, Siddal and Gaudaris established a lair in an isolated cave complex far from civilized lands. This location has become a nightmare of infestation and disease, teeming with worms, insects, swarms of rats, and a filthy otiu that wallows in the accumulated refuse. The partnership between Siddal and Gaudaris extends beyond simple cohabitation. They work collaboratively, combining their respective areas of expertise to develop new, highly virulent strains of existing diseases. Their laboratory efforts focus on creating contagions more resistant to treatment, more rapid in transmission, more devastating in their effects. Originally, this work possessed a quasi-rational motivation. They sought to spread disease among encroaching human farming communities, using plague as a weapon to drive back civilization and preserve their isolated territory. Time and isolation have eroded even this thin veneer of purpose. Siddal and Gaudaris now continue their vile experiments purely for psychopathic pleasure. They derive satisfaction from the knowledge that somewhere in the world, people suffer from diseases they created. They enjoy imagining the spread of their creations through unsuspecting populations. The work itself has become the goal, a shared obsession that binds them together in mutual depravity. The relationship between these two carries additional complexities that add layers of dysfunction to an already disturbing situation. Siddal normally wears a veil when within the cave complex, a practical measure designed to prevent her petrifying gaze from accidentally affecting Gaudaris or their various vermin servants. This consideration, however, stems from utility rather than sentiment. Siddal would not hesitate to remove the veil and weaponize her gaze against Gaudaris if doing so would save her from serious danger. She views him as a useful asset, not a cherished companion, and would sacrifice him without remorse if circumstances demanded it. Gaudaris, by contrast, harbors feelings towards Siddal that border on worship. He is secretly, madly in love with her in all her diseased, corrupted glory. Where others see a repulsive monster who has abandoned even the vanity that makes most Medusas comprehensible, Gaudaris sees perfection. Her embrace of decay, her masochistic self-mutilation, her complete rejection of conventional beauty standards, all of these qualities attract him with magnetic intensity. Most disturbing of all is Gaudaris's ultimate fantasy regarding his relationship with Siddal. He harbors a dark, twisted belief that there exists a secret ecstasy in being petrified by her gaze. He imagines that the moment of transformation, that instant when living flesh becomes eternal stone under the power of her eyes, would represent the pinnacle of their connection. He longs to experience this transformation, to become one of her petrified victims, viewing this fate not as death, but as a form of dark consummation. This obsession drives Gaudaris's continued cooperation with Siddal's disease experiments. He aids her research, provides her with test subjects drawn from local wildlife or the occasional lost traveler, and supports her work in hopes of winning her favor. His ultimate plan involves drugging her to lower her guard, then standing before her unveiled face to receive the full force of her petrifying gaze. In his diseased imagination, this represents not suicide but transcendence, the achievement of perfect union through transformation into one of her stone trophies. The examination of basilisks and medusas reveals fundamental truths about the nature of monstrous threats in the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons. These creatures demonstrate that lethality manifests in vastly different forms, each requiring distinct approaches, strategies, and mindsets to overcome. The basilisk and the medusa, though united by their shared capacity for petrification, represent opposite ends of the monster spectrum in nearly every other regard. The basilisk embodies the threat of monstrous nature, a creature whose every adaptation serves the singular purpose of killing efficiently while expending minimal energy. Its eight-legged body, its patient hunting strategy, its conservative approach to combat, all of these elements combine to create a predator perfectly suited to its ecological niche. Adventurers facing basilisks confront a zoological threat, a dangerous animal that can be understood through study of its behavior, predicted through analysis of its physical capabilities, and defeated through exploitation of its limitations. The Medusa, conversely, represents the threat of malevolent intelligence. This creature does not simply react to stimuli like an animal. It plans, it schemes, it anticipates, and it adapts. The Medusa understands social dynamics well enough to infiltrate civilized society, comprehends economics sufficiently to build criminal enterprises, and possesses enough psychological insight to manipulate victims into lowering their guards. Facing a Medusa requires not just combat skill, but mental preparation for an opponent who thinks, who plots, who sets traps within traps. The variants and exceptional specimens of both species expand these threat profiles in ways that challenge even experienced adventurers. The abyssal greater basilisk transforms a dangerous but fundamentally manageable terrestrial predator into a fiendish nightmare that serves demon lords and shrugs off attacks that would fell lesser creatures. This variant demonstrates that familiar threats can evolve into something far more dangerous when environmental pressures or planar influences come into play. Sidal and Godaris represent a different form of expansion, showing that individual specimens can develop in directions that defy species norms. Sidal abandoned the vanity that defines most Medusas, embracing disease and decay in ways that disturb even her evil sisters. Godaris developed an obsession so profound and twisted that it drives his entire existence toward a goal most beings would consider the ultimate nightmare. These exceptional individuals demonstrate that truly dangerous monsters are not merely powerful. They are unpredictable, operating according to motivations and logic that resist standard analysis. The criminal organizations and dark alliances that form around these creatures illustrate another crucial truth. Monsters do not exist in isolation. The men of the Basilisk adopt the creature's name to inspire terror, demonstrating how a monster's reputation can be weaponized by those who never actually possess the creature's capabilities. Sidal and Godaris form a partnership that amplifies both their individual threats through cooperation, creating a combined danger greater than either could achieve alone. The Hag Countess employing Medusas in her infernal court shows how intelligent monsters can be integrated into larger power structures. For adventurers, the lessons are clear. Surviving encounters with basilisks requires understanding of ecology, terrain, and predatory behavior. Avoiding the petrifying gaze means recognizing the creature's preferred ambush sites, maintaining proper spacing to stay outside the 30-foot range when possible, and being prepared to avert eyes or close to melee range where the creature's physical attacks, while dangerous, offer better survival odds than its supernatural gaze. Surviving Medusa encounters demands different skills entirely. Social awareness becomes as important as combat capability. The ability to recognize deception, to maintain appropriate paranoia when approached by strangers in dangerous areas, to resist the temptation to trust appearances, these soft skills often determine outcomes more than weapon proficiency or armor class. In combat, the discipline to fight with averted eyes, accepting the penalties to accuracy rather than risking the petrifying gaze, separates survivors from statuary. The existence of creatures like the Basilisk and Medusa also raises philosophical questions about the nature of evil in fantasy worlds. The Basilisk, for all its danger, acts according to instinct. It hunts because it hungers. It petrifies because evolution granted it this capability. Assigning moral judgment to its actions seems almost absurd. It is a predator. Dangerous, yes. Evil in the cosmic sense? Arguably not. The Medusa allows for no such ambiguity. These creatures choose evil, embrace it, revel in it. They possess the intelligence to understand the suffering they cause and the moral capacity to choose differently. They simply do not care. The Medusa kills, not from hunger, but from greed. It petrifies not for survival, but for advantage. This conscious embrace of malevolence places the Medusa firmly in the category of evil that deserves opposition, that demands heroes willing to risk petrification to stop it. Sidal takes this conscious evil even further, demonstrating that within evil itself exist gradations and depths. Her embrace of disease, her masochistic obsessions, her partnership with Godaries in creating new plagues for sadistic pleasure, all of this transcends conventional evil into something more disturbing. She represents evil that has become its own purpose, malevolence divorced from even the thin justifications of profit or power. The stare of eternity, as some scholars call the petrifying gaze, represents one of the most final and absolute magical effects in existence. Unlike death, which allows for resurrection and restoration, petrification often proves more permanent. A petrified creature exists in a state of suspended animation, transformed into solid stone while technically still alive. This unique status creates both opportunity and danger. Breaking the statue kills the victim permanently. Restoring them requires powerful magic that may not be available. The petrified creature remains aware, trapped in a stone prison, experiencing eternity in an instant. This particular horror elevates basilisks and medusas above creatures that simply kill. Death, in worlds where resurrection magic exists, represents a temporary setback for important individuals. Petrification, however, creates complications that standard resurrection cannot address. The victim must first be restored from stone to flesh, then potentially healed or resurrected depending on their condition. This multi-step process requires resources, time, and magical capabilities that may exceed what is available. The legacy of these creatures extends through legend, mythology, and practical impact on the world. Areas known to harbor basilisks become no-go zones where travel ceases and trade routes shift to avoid the threat. Cities infiltrated by medusas experience crime waves that authorities struggle to address because witnesses disappear into stone before they can testify. The threat these creatures represent shapes behavior across entire regions, influencing decisions made by people who may never personally encounter a basilisk or medusa, but who live in the shadow of their legendary danger. Understanding basilisks and medusas, truly comprehending what they are and how they operate, transforms them from simple monster manual entries into three-dimensional threats that enrich the worlds they inhabit. The basilisk waiting in the desert wastes becomes more than a combat encounter. It becomes an ecological reality that explains why certain areas remain unexplored, why certain paths are avoided, why certain ruins remain unplundered, despite rumors of treasure. The Medusa operating in the criminal underworld becomes more than a boss fight. It becomes a recurring threat that influences entire campaign arcs, a manipulator whose schemes touch multiple storylines. The stare of eternity continues to claim victims across countless worlds and countless campaigns. The basilisk hunts, the Medusa schemes, the abyssal greater basilisk serves its demon lords. Citadel cultivates her diseases. Each represents a facet of the petrification threat, a variation on the theme of the gaze that turns flesh to stone. Together, they ensure that adventurers who explore dangerous places must always remember to watch where they look, because sometimes seeing is not believing. Sometimes seeing is dying. Sometimes seeing is becoming a monument to one's own carelessness, a stone warning to future generations that some gazes should never be met.